Well, hello, and welcome to the MilVet Podcast. Your podcast hosts are Brendan Aronson, Tim Shaw, and Beau Higgins. We are military veterans, entrepreneurs, and investors. But most importantly, we strive to empower military service members, veterans, and their families. We believe that all veterans deserve a career that fires them up, a career in which you can learn, you can earn, and you can build a world class network. On this podcast, we interview civilian and military veteran leaders who are incredible founders, writers, thinkers, and investors. My primary goal is to inspire you to achieve great things. Let's dive into today's episode. Well, hello, and welcome to another edition of the MilVet Podcast. I am your host, Beau Higgins, and I have the pleasure to be joined today by Mike Martin, who will share his story of transition. For those that may not be familiar with the MilVet provides an executive pathway for veterans that are interested in getting into primarily the private equity and venture capital space. If you're interested in that, I encourage you to check out themilvet.org. Check out the opportunities we have available. Check out our podcast. Sign up for our newsletter. Lots of great information there for those veterans that may be interested in getting into what can be a challenging space sometime. But today, we are focused on our podcast and our guest. And Mike, welcome to the show. Great to have you here.
Yeah. Hey, thanks, Beau. Thanks for the intro, and thanks for your service and for what you're doing at MilVet. So I'm really happy to be here.
No, appreciate it, and excited to dig into your career and kind of what your trajectory is like, because everybody's path's a little different. I'd like to start off though, kind of can you give a quick snapshot of what you're doing these days to kind of talk about where you are today, and we'll back it up from there.
Sure. I think it'd be surprising to most people that know me, because a lot of people don't know what I'm doing today. They think of me being the hedge fund guy, but I co-founded a defense tech startup recently, and we design really unique missile systems that are really powered by specifically ramjet technology. And on top of that, we've created a ecosystem of supply chain developers, manufacturing partners, because we're an asset light model. We're very much like I call it the iPhone for defense. And so we call it as defense as a service. We have heavy design, but we again look for our manufacturing partners to produce our weapon systems for our customers.
That is,
I started that. Yeah, yeah. We started that been about a year right now going on.
Okay, no, that's exciting stuff, and I'm fascinated by it, and look forward to talking about that more. Before we get there, though, I want to bring it back all the way to the beginning, and really, for the most of our listeners on the podcast are veterans that are transitioned out or transitioning now. I'd love to kind of understand the motivation. What got you into the Navy, into the Naval Academy? What was was it family? Was it friends? Was it something random? I'm always curious about what was the spark back in the day.
Yeah, it's really odd. I gotta be honest with you. I remember as a kid watching one of the Service Academy football games at my uncle's house, and my dad saying to me, "Hey, do you think you'd ever want to go to a Service Academy?" And my answer was absolutely no. And then as I went through high school, I remember a really good friend of mine. Her name was Wendy, and she had just gotten back from the Annapolis commencement, and she said, "Mike, this place is amazing. It is the coolest place in the world." She's like, the people that I met that are graduating there are sharp, they're bright, they're good looking, they got a job, they're going places. She's like, you would be perfect for this place. And she said, Mike, in fact, if you go here, I'll marry you. And it's my wheels spin. I said, well, if she's gonna marry me, then that means there's gonna be a bunch of girls ready to marry me if I go to this place. But I was just joking. But I went into my guidance counselor's office. I said, hey, do you have anything on the Naval Academy? And she sent me this it was almost like a book, and it was beautiful. It had the Naval Academy fleet with the spinnakers out. I mean, the place looked awesome. So I started doing the research, and then I was pretty late in the process. I was already kind of my early senior years, so I had to really step up and get the nominations, go through that process, because the application process, as we all know, it's a long process.
Yeah.
And I was able to get the nomination and go through it, but unfortunately, I did not get a appointment. And so it wasn't until, and so then I was going to go to University of Michigan, and it wasn't until late that summer before Michigan that I got a call from Captain Flight from the Naval Academy Alumni Association. And he said, Mike, Captain Flight here. We want to sponsor you at the Naval Academy Foundation. I said, what is that? And he goes, well, we send you to a prep school for a year. You take on some more courses. You continue swimming, and then you get to the academy. And I said, well, what's the acceptance rate? He's like, well, it's like 90 something percent. And I said, what happened to that other 7%? He's like, those are kids that like did something stupid, got kicked out. And so I was like, well, all right, so that's a high return there on that year. And I was always the type of guy that always wanted to take the path less traveled. So I saw all my friends go in one direction. I always like to go the opposite. And so, as they were going on to universities, I said, you know what, this is an option to do something really different. I was always compelled to community service. I wasn't out of the Eagle Scout. I wasn't, part of that, but I always served my community growing up, and I thought that this was a real way to serve. I also realized that, I had an option, right? Like when you go to the academy, although you are taking someone's spot, if it's not right for you, you have an option to leave, within that first 2 years.
Yeah.
And so when I called Michigan and told them what I was doing, they said, hey, we'll just keep on rolling your admissions. So I felt that's when I first realized about the value of an option. And it kind of goes into my career as a convertible bond trader and options trader. But that was my first experience.
That's pretty cool, and I'm glad it worked out. And definitely not the most straightforward path to go through the prep school to get there, but obviously it worked out for you. Did you know early on in your time at the academy what you wanted to do on the back end as far as get your designator? Is that something that you like right away wanted to get into, or did you that kind of did you know all the options even when you started out? How that process work for you? Some guys know like I want to be a pilot, or I want to be a SEAL, or I want to be a Marine. Did that? What was your? It sounded like you kind of came in like, I'll just figure it out. I'll kind of go along and figure it out. I don't know.
Yeah, I kind of say figure it out on the way, and not each path is linear. I call it the non-linear path. And when I got to the academy, I was like, all right, I'm going to be a doctor. This seems really cool. Navy medicine, they'll send me and pay for medical school. I'll be a doc in the Navy and the Marine Corps, and then serve the time and get out and go to private practice. Well, first semester I got a B in chemistry, and so immediately it like eliminated me from that pipeline, which is fine, right? Which is totally
Right.
fine. And so then you kind of figure out what else you're going to do. And I remember when 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 I got there, we were looking for a ring and crest chairman, and so I got in front of the class and I said, hey, my name is Mike Martin, and I want to be our chairman for all these reasons. And I got elected to be the chairman of the ring crest committee. And my officer rep was this guy named Lieutenant Matt Hickey, and Matt Hickey is a graduate of the Naval Academy, early 90s, and he was a Navy SEAL. And so I got an opportunity to go into his office, sit down with him, and work with him on the Ring of Crest committee. And I really got to know Matt, or Lieutenant Hickey, and he was by far head and shoulders the best officer at the Naval Academy.
Hmm.
And I said to myself, if he is a product of the Navy SEALs, I want everything that the Navy SEALs is selling, and I want that. And so then all of a sudden, I tried out for scuba school that freshman year, plebe year. I was the only plebe that made it through that training
Wow.
pipeline and program through. They everyone quit, and then they sent like the top 20 or something like that to scuba school. So I was the only one with my bubble as a I guess as a youngster. And then the next summer I went to airborne school. So then I was like double trouble. And then I just kept on going through the wickets. And so I said, service assignment. I said, I want to be the candidate that they cannot say no to. And so I decided, I was going to be the top one in the PT test. I was going to be the only one with double trouble or the gold wings and the school pin. It was going to be almost impossible for me not to get picked for the SEAL program. And as long as I kept my conduct in shape, and performance in shape, and academics in shape, I really thought I'd be a natural decision to go into the teams.
That's awesome. No, it's funny again. One door closes on being a doctor, and another one opens up there, and And it speaks also to this the importance of mentorship, and obviously having a guy like that early in your military career at the Naval Academy to kind of show you the example of what that path could look like that you could then follow, and he could help you kind of get to where you didn't even know where you wanted to be, but to have those mentors that can pull you up and send that elevator back down is such an important part of all of our careers in the military. I think we all have had those guys that have seen some potential in us that we didn't even know existed. And obviously, you had that there at the academy, and it led you into being a SEAL. And I would you obviously were able successfully made that happen and had the focus to make that happen, which is hugely important, is to be successful as a SEAL. What any highlights of your time? Well, I mean, you obviously were in for a good bit of time, but love to talk about just your leaving the military and or leaving the academy and getting into the actual active duty forces. What highlights do you have from those years?
Yeah, I'll tell you, I loved being a SEAL. I mean, if there's one thing that I think I was built for, it was being a SEAL officer. And I loved the men. I keep in touch with when I say my guys, I mean my teammates all the time. From the kid who was an E4 in my platoon to my former commodore or admiral in charge of the community. So my way was always up and down the chain of command. I wanted to be well respected. First you got to be competent, second of all you got to be a great operator, third of all you got to take care of your people. And maybe that's first, right? Take care of your people take care of you. But I never felt that I was above anybody. When it came to putting the gear on the pallets, I was out there with the guys building the pallets. When I was there, taking care of the boats and motors, you're out there doing the PMS on the boats and motors with the guys, or cleaning the weapons with the guys. I never wanted to be that guy like in the ivory tower. And so I had this mutual respect for my teammates, and I think anyone that's been on a high performing team would love to be in the SEALs, right? You can look to your left, you can look to your right. That guy will die for you, and that you'll die for him. And so I think there's no better spot to be in life when you are surrounded with your brothers in arms that will do anything for one another. And so like that was certainly a highlight. Obviously, post 9/11, we were in training in the desert up in Island, California. I pulled the platoon together. I said, guys, we're going to war. That's a matter of fact. Whoever did that to the towers is going to pay, and we're going to get there. And you know what? I want to be the de facto, platoon at SEAL Team One that gets the choice to have the confidence of the commander to go. And so we all agreed. Listen, the more we train, a higher probability to go to war goes up. And the more we train, the higher probability of us all coming home goes up. And so we did train on the weekends. I know guys were married, they probably hated it. They wanted to spend time with their kids. But this is a competitive race. SEAL platoons are very competitive, SEALs are competitive. And we wanted to be the group that went. And so when we deployed, we ended up going and deploying in Afghanistan with the platoon. And that was really one of the highlights. Everyone remembers their first, right? Their first, whatever it is, their first jump, whatever that is. This was the first combat operation that, we went on and part of SEAL Team One. And it was an honor and a privilege to serve the country, but also to represent the community in Afghanistan.
I 100% get it. I mean, as a guy that did it firsthand as well, I was on the Mew when we were training in Australia on 9/11, and by November we were in country in Afghanistan. And I've never felt more. I mean, I did 8 deployments over my time in the Marine Corps, but that one in particular stands out, as you knew you had the whole country behind you, and you wanted to be like they were. I've never been prouder than to be there that early on, to be the guys on the pointy edge of the spear, to be there. There was something special about that time, and there were like no rules and nobody knew what was going on. Kind of the chain of command was short. It was just like go figure it the heck out, man. It was beautiful. It was great.
Yeah, I mean, you could write your own con-ops and execute them and
Totally
approve them, right? And what I loved about it was just the joint nature, right?
right.
So the Army Task Force 160th, the German Special Operations, the people from Canada Special Operations, I thought were phenomenal. And I
Yep.
never had exposure to all these this joint coalition of forces, and we would work together. I mean, our first op that I went on was sort of our breaking in op, and the Canadian Special Forces did a target hit, and we were the cordon exterior perimeter force for them. And sure enough, first op, of course you're gonna get in a firefight, right? And I'll tell you what, as far as going from peacetime SEAL to wartime SEAL, that was a pretty. I mean, we call it a warm up operation. I tell you what, there's nothing nothing warmer than doing that. It was not a flop of an op. It was a real op, and bullets were flying and guys got hurt. And I'll tell you what, that really was an eye opening experience for us to realize, like, yeah, this is the Super Bowl of war, and it is a coalition force to fight it together.
No, love that. And yeah, we had the opportunity to serve with the Australian SAS guys when we were down there in Afghanistan early on. Folks you never would have worked with otherwise, too, because of just the nature of that conflict. It was amazing, and it's just a unique time. But and you're right. You got your head on pretty quick because it was the real game. It wasn't preseason anymore, man. It was game time and game on, and yeah, it was fun times back then for sure. Definitely good memories. Now,
my
how did
my last tour,
yeah, go
yeah,
ahead.
my
Go
last
ahead.
tour was in Hawaii, and
Okay.
and my last tour was in Hawaii. I wanted to go and serve in the underwater realm of naval special warfare, and I figured, as a SEAL that was on West Coast, SEAL Team One, SEAL Team Seven, I really wanted to kind of broaden my skill set, and I really thought the underwater domain was really interesting. I was supposed to do this pilot course for the ASDS, which is the Advanced Seal Delivery System. It's a multi hundreds of millions-dollar system. I was going to be the co-pilot, go through that program. So I went over to SDB Team One, did another operations tour, and then right before I did another deployment to Iraq as a TU commander in Fallujah. But when I got back for that pilot course, I got picked up for XO, and so all of a sudden, my world just sort of collided. I started dating my now wife. I got picked up for XO. I was going to go out to Bahrain at XO Unit 3. My dad was really sick. And I was like, how am I going to do all this, manage this relationship, manage my dad's health? He was bankrupt. I mean, house foreclosed on. And I said, how am I going to take care of my family? Um, on a military wage, and also, advance this relationship with my girlfriend, knowing that I'd be gone for the next 2 years. So I came in, I told the CEO it's time for me to hang up the fins, and they were shocked. I feel like when you get out of the military, you want to get out on a highlight. You don't want the military to tell you that they're done with you. So I feel like I was ready to go into the Hall of Fame with my batting average, but it was time for me to leave and explore what was out there. I always thought my service was going to be short, but I always took every job with the option of having a 30 plus year career.
Yeah.
And I was really focused, the competitive nature. I was really focused on selecting, ahead of my peer group and et cetera. And I loved being a SEAL. I did love
Yeah.
being a SEAL. It was those things, the other things that I couldn't control, that really influenced my decision to hang it up. And I've been married and with the same woman for 20 years. We have 5 kids. I was able to leave service and make enough money to take care of my dad, financially and medically. And so, all the reasons why I got out and then I also made a commitment that I could give more back to the community than I did when I was a SEAL. So as soon as I got out, I joined the board of the Navy SEAL Foundation. It was the Navy SEAL Warrior Fund at the time. At the time, we raised maybe $1 million for the community. We had just gotten started. Now we're raising $40 million a year. I just left the board this year. We were, ranked 99.9% on all the Charity Navigator, top decile of deciles as far as fiduciaries of capital, and really grew that. And I think of, like, as a business, like when you're growing from 1 million of revenue to 40 million, you can't do it by yourself. You got to have the right people in place, the right leadership in place. But all those things, giving back to the community more than I could if I had served, taking care of my dad, growing a family, making sure, financially secure, all of those things I wanted outside of the military, I was able to get and really, really keep that promise to my command officer at SDV Team One.
No, it's interesting because I always say, I think for everybody in their military career, there comes a point, and hopefully one that you make is your decision. Sometimes it's not your decision, but when you know, and there's just other factors out there. It's not like you don't like the military, but there's a million things going on in life, and life happens, and you pivoted away from that, but for great reasons and with great success, and still were able to take the lessons learned and the goodness from what your time was in the military and obviously use that as you transitioned out. And did you know? It sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the decision to leave was not quick, but did you put time into what you wanted to do next, or was it kind of like, or did you know, like, were you kind of thinking ahead of where you wanted to go once you left the military service? How'd that
No, I
happen?
mean,
Yeah,
listen, I got to tell you,
yeah,
I was heads down post 9/11 operating.
yeah,
I was a war junkie. I try to get on every bird going overseas so I could operate with the guys. I loved being overseas. When I decided to get out, it was that moment where I got picked up for XO, and I had that sinking feeling in my chest about going back overseas for a couple of years, not being an operator anymore, and then all those other things with my wife and my dad, kind of justified that decision.
yeah,
And so when I decided to get out, I had like less than 3 months to
yeah,
prepare for my exit.
yeah,
So, and then, again, my other, my detailer, who I'm still tight with today, he was pretty upset about me, right? Because I took
yeah,
an XO spot, somebody had gotten passed over. So, he wanted to keep me into October. So then all of a sudden I was disqualified for any MBA program, even though it would have been a rushed effort to get into one. The
yeah.
military, the commercial world did not have these internship programs they went the way
No.
they had now. And in fact, I was one that started the military internship program at Merrill Lynch, then Bank of America. I helped start VETS, the Veterans on Wall Street, or VILES, sorry, Veterans
Yeah,
on Wall
yeah,
Street.
yeah,
And so that those sources were not there and available. So I literally like got on a plane, flew from Hawaii, went to New York, knocked on doors, went to DC, walked on doors, and so my hit rate was pretty high. I mean, I had 4 job offers right away, and so then I had to pick one, but I had no experience in any of these job
yeah.
sectors. I didn't go to business school program where I could do internships and kind of assess whether I liked it or they liked me, et cetera. So it was a very very speed dating process with a decision. I had to make a quick decision on what to do.
And you say, obviously you went to New York, started knocking on doors. Were the doors open because of the SEAL community and military community? Was it from the Naval Academy larger community, or how the doors get open for you? To kind of get some perspective on that.
Sure. So I had a mentor who was a former SEAL, and he went into private equity. He's now running for governor of Wisconsin, Bill Berrien. I hope he wins. But shameless plug for Bill. But Bill and I met in Hawaii when he was working in private equity, and he and I would talk often. And then finally, I said, "Bill, I'm getting out." And he said, "Mike, all right, let's figure out what you want to do." And he said, "Mike, do you want to go into finance?" And I said, "Listen, I know nothing about finance, but if I want to be a CEO of a company, I have to know finance." So then we kind of narrowed it down like, hey, let's look at some Wall Street jobs. I had another buddy of mine in DC at the Office of Legislative Affairs. He put me in contact with another guy, and so the other option was working for the president of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce in D.C. You know, you're basically his aide, but you get exposure to every CEO in the United States. And so there was two sort of courses of action. Heavy finance or heavy DC working for the head of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and then another one was in commercial real estate. I went to knock on these doors, and everyone was very open for these informational interviews, right? Come on in, I'll tell you what I do. You can hear me talk for an hour and then, nothing there. What I would say is, there was a guy at Merrill Lynch who was a pretty senior guy, Chris Loopold, and he's great. So what he said, Mike, we'll give you an information interview. You're going to talk with, these 8 people. And so it was almost like a super day. And so, but he's like, no expectations, right? We're not hiring. We don't do this sort of stuff. And so I met with a bunch of directors and managing directors at Merrill Lynch at Fort World Financial in New York. And I ran the gauntlet, equity capital markets, equity sales and trading, options, ETFs, you name it. And I met this guy, and he's like, I like your watch. We're talking, and like, yeah, it's a, I can't even remember the type of watch it was, it was it was one of those steel watches, that had all the, calculations on everything. And he's like, do you do triathlons? I was like, yeah, I was captain of the team. And then he's like, you know what? You got to meet Tom Patrick. And Tom Patrick at the time ran all of equity linked securities. So anything that was linked to equity. So convertibles and options really are the two main there's also some structured products. So I met with Tom, and Tom, like, pretty serious guy. He's like, hey, you want to come back tomorrow? I want you to sit with all of our options traders and our convertible traders. And then I went back the next day, and I met with Tom the next day. He's like, we want to offer you a job.
Holy
And
smokes.
and Tom said, and he's like, we don't ever do this. We'll bring you in as a third year associate. He's like, but listen, I don't want to pressure you. He's like, take your time. So he's like, call me whenever you want. If you want, he's like, that there's no expiration on this job offer. And so I went back to Hawaii, and then I got a job offer at Credit Suisse in risk as a vice president, and again, no expiration on this job offer. And then I got the offer with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, this offer of this commercial real estate in Dallas. And I started thinking about it. And someone said, Mike, like, you're an operator, you love action. Maybe being on the trading floor is a right spot for you rather than this cubicle up on the 40th floor where, it's like a library, and where people are yelling and swearing and cursing and throwing phones and whatnot. And so I really thought hard of it, and I finally called Tom Patrick up, and I said, Tom, I'm going to accept the job. And he's like, where have you been? We've been waiting for, again, being a military guy, you just don't know how the, civilian corporate world works on recruiting. And so I called him up. He's like, hey, we got a job for you. And, we negotiated, a little bonus to get me to, get to out to New York. I mean, I had no money. And I remember I came to New York City with maybe about 30,000 in my bank account. A job offer at Merrill Lynch as a convertible bond trader. I had no idea what convertible bonds were. I bought this book called Finance for Dummies.
Yeah,
My my
that's
wife laughs at me. Yeah, she's like, these guys recruit everywhere from Harvard and Wharton and Columbia, and here Mike is, Finance for Dummies. So I missed the entire I missed the associate program. I missed all the programs. I showed up so I left the Navy on a Friday, and I showed up at Merrill on a Monday. And so when people asked me about my transition, I was like, oh man, it was awesome. A weekend in New York City, eating oysters at a oyster fest.
that is, and a good watch, which obviously helped. So that was key to this whole
Yeah,
story.
yeah. Well, it's important to have those things on your resume about activities,
Yeah,
because you never know when
the
it strikes a
connection.
chord with
Yeah,
somebody. I still remember this guy that he was a SEAL, and his favorite pastime or activities were like RVing and chihuahuas. And so, like, you know, every time I saw that resume, I was like, I gotta talk to this guy, right? Like, this is awesome. And he had like this awesome story to back it up. And so when I tell people, all the resumes look the same,
yeah,
4.0, president of this, all American this. I said, activities is where you can really stand apart, and
that's
and
funny.
think of it like something that makes you unique, not like I like to play poker and I like to ski and I like to
Yeah.
do triathlons.
Like
Like really,
sports.
like hey, like underwater basket weaving, whatever that is, like figure
Yeah.
it
That's awesome. That's a great story. I mean, it's that is very non-typical, obviously, of being able to get into that world without having the traditional MBA. 'Cause that's the typical path, right? That you finish up your time in the military, you go back at your MBA, you go into a training program on Wall Street, but to be able to bypass that, I mean, how did you feel? I mean, you had to feel somewhat of an imposter syndrome there, because I assume all the other guys in the program were coming from the Columbias and Harvards and Whartons of the world, right? I mean, how did you? I mean, you obviously have other things than they had, but they had, they could read a P&L, they could do some things maybe that you couldn't. So how did you balance that? I mean, how did you make up for what you didn't have, or catch up in that way? There's certainly areas you would have had to catch up in. I mean, finance for dummies is great. That's probably
out.
not quite an MBA.
100%. I remember telling my wife, she was my girlfriend at the time. Every day I'd come home from work, I like, oh, they're gonna fire me. Oh, they're gonna fire me. And she's like, Mike, you've been saying that every day for the last 3 years, right? And I gotta tell you, like, totally, like everyone there, they talked the talk, they spoke the language, they knew the Greeks, they knew everything, what to say. To me, this was a complete foreign language, right?
Right.
Um, I think what happened was a couple of things. One, what I tried to do was try to add value immediately and where I could add value. And so, and it sounds stupid, right? But like I was the guy that took the sandwich orders and the breakfast orders for the trading desk, so they could trade all the way through the trading hours. Like you don't leave for lunch or breakfast, and you call it a breakfast print or a lunch print, and that was an opportunity for me to do something for somebody else. And so they always felt compelled, like if I had questions, to help me out, right? It's really hard if somebody's performing a service for you and then you basically tell them to shove off if they ask for something in return. So I felt like that was really helpful to like kind of break that ice and like really ask for mentorship. And so I think everyone on that desk was really open to helping me out and helping me to be successful. And so when you build that, like that team of teams approach, I love that term,
Yeah.
Sam McChrystal and the folks that wrote that, is so true, right? You build this ecosystem of mentors and friends. And so, um, and then what happened is I got there in October of '06. Late in 2007 is when we started seeing the cracks of the financial crisis. And every trader wants to have their own pad. I mean, everyone talked on Wall Street. Hey, do you have your own pad? Do you have your own pad? And you're like, no, I'm a trader assistant. I'm a trader assistant. I answer the phones and take orders and maybe hedge deltas. And then all of a sudden, the guy that was the head trader for REITs and financials and insurance, he he never saw the volatility in the markets that we saw in '07, and things like the bond floors were dropping, and next thing you know, bonds were being offered down 3 or 4 points. And the boss came to him, and the manager said, hey, I need you to get rid of these bonds. And the next day came in, and he couldn't get rid of them, right? He couldn't find a buyer, and then he just went on and on and on. So finally the managing director said, Mike, you're in, he's out. You got financials, REITs, insurance, you got all that. It was a multi-billion-dollar pad, right? Because everything that we trade in convertibles is over the counter, so it's not so you're always taking inventory risk, whether you're long or short based on what the customer wants to do. And so I took over that portfolio, and he said, listen, you got to sell these, you got to reduce your exposure. And so I immediately went to that sales team that I've been, basically being their lunch. I told people I'm
I'm the
the
lunch guy.
most overpriced lunch boy in the world, right? Like nobody pays this much money for lunch. And so, but I went right to that sales team and I said, guys, here's what I got. I got to move this inventory, right? I need your help. And they go, Mike, how much you got to move? I got, what's the bond? What's the coupon? What's the, and I'm like, here's the list. And these guys are like, hey, Mike, I'll buy five. I'll buy five. I'll buy 10 million, 5 million. Boom, 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 boom. Next thing you know, I was reducing my risk along the way. And, most of my peer group through the financial crisis, the person in my seat at Bank of America or Credit Suisse or JP Morgan. I mean, they lost hundreds of millions of dollars in 2008. I made 20 million bucks, which is crazy, right?
Yeah.
It's 20 million is not a lot of money for P&L,
But
but
when
for in a
everybody's
year
losing, yeah,
where I lost half a billion, it was a major win. And so that was a moment in time where I just figured it out, right? When you got folks in the trenches, and like Wall Street loves war analogy, we're in the trenches, it's a knife fight, get the machetes out, right? And I'm like, and my boss looks at me and goes, Mike, come on, just work with me here. I got to motivate the team. And it was like, guys, like it was like Armageddon for finance, right? And
yeah,
so we just had to figure it out. We knew that Merrill Lynch had all this risk, but again, you can only focus on what you can control.
sure,
And for me, it was that portfolio, doing my share to reduce the risk that Merrill Lynch had, to reduce the risk on my team's portfolio, the convertible group at Merrill Lynch at the time, and to be, what I'd say like a solid teammate and a good operator. And what happened was, myself and another associate from the Air Force Academy were the only two associates really that survived the financial crisis at Merrill
mm,
Lynch. Because what they did was they trimmed all of the newbies, and they trimmed all of the, like, what I'd say the legacy managing directors, and they really trimmed everything down to the constant layoffs. And it was the two of us, myself and Matt, that really kind of rose to the challenge. And we fed off each other. It was great. We were both new guys coming out of the military. Matt had gotten his MBA at Duke, but great guy. And so we really rose to the occasion during that time, and really contributed to that desk. And, both Matt and I got promoted to director together. He's now running the desk at Merrill Lynch. But yeah, it was that period of time that sort of like, you could really tell, who you want on your teammate when there's times of stress. And I think a lot of these folks that came from these MBA environments and never been stressed at bested before, they just collapse, right?
yeah.
And you can't test that character on a spreadsheet or a CV, right? You kind of have to go through this what I would call like Armageddon to kind of figure out, who is the team that you want to go through this sort of challenge. And there's a lot of analogies on the SEAL teams, right? Like, who do you want to go into combat with? We judge each other all the time, and there's certain guys in the platoon or certain guys in the command that's your first pick. When the bullets are flying, and it's the same thing in on a team on Wall Street. Who do you want to be in the trench with? And I think the financial crisis really helped sort that out.
It's a great analogy, and I talk about similar things a lot at the MilVet because again, we are trying to find and we're looking to place military veterans into the private equity and venture capital space, right? And what we think the differentiator is there's a lot of guys that have gotten their MBAs that are really smart and can do finance, they can do the numbers, but that piece of just what you said, that grit, that leadership, that have been through those crucible moments before, are what's going to make you different, separate from the crowd. So when that crucible, 2008 was the 9/11 of Wall Street, right? That was like things were crazy, and people like yourself, rose to the top because of. It's not because you were the smartest guy. I mean, not necessarily, it's because you knew how to lead and survive in chaos, right? I mean, I think that's something that we emphasize that a lot at the MilVet. Like when we talk to our potential customers of, hey, not only are you getting a great guy that does know the financial piece of it, but in addition to that, they can lead up, they can lead down, they have grit, they can grind through the hard stuff that's going to come up at some point in time. So that I think those intangibles that the military gives to you or would separate those veteran candidates from maybe their peers that have a great education and pedigree on paper that maybe don't have the just that again those crucible experiences to make it through when something like that really happens. So yeah, it's great to see. I love that story. Very cool. And how long did you stay there for? I mean, I know you obviously moved on to other things from there. What was I mean, you obviously survived that, and that had to be almost like well, when you got through that, you're like, man, I'm good to go. This is easy now.
Yeah.
Did it ever get easy? ever get to a point where you felt like you belonged? I mean, when did that happen? I assume that experience
Oh,
had to make it feel like you did belong after surviving that, right? Or just how that? I mean, it doesn't happen overnight necessarily, but at some point you had to feel like, okay, I'm no longer like imposter syndrome. I belong here now.
oh, 100%. I think going through that financial crisis and being a vital member of the team. Then I got pulled into recruiting for the group, and so then you got your exposure to people across the entire organization on the recruiting side, and so you really felt like you were part of that pulse of the organization, right? And so not only when you can do your job and do it well with your teammates, but you're also part of the future selection process of the new people coming in. That was like a really empowering opportunity for me, and one that I really enjoyed doing. I was able to recruit and bring in a lot of folks onto various teams across Merrill Lynch. I think really, I put a lot of pressure on myself because I knew that if I wasn't successful, the door would be closed to many other behind me.
Yep.
And if I
Yep.
was successful, then I could open the door for many to come in. And so when I was at Merrill, yeah, we started this informal, veterans group, and I was bringing in folks, out of business school or direct hires out of the military, and they saw my success, and they said, this was a great case study that was successful here. Let's bring this person on our team. So through that, I was very helpful with a lot of veterans coming in to finance. And it was if it wasn't at Merrill, then it was somebody at Citi or somebody at JP that I knew.
Yeah.
And so we were able to kind of Morgan Stanley, we were able to pass resumes around and really get these folks in there. I think the thing that when I decided to leave was really post Merrill Lynch and Bank of America. And Bank of America is a great organization. I mean, you have access to everything. When I was at Merrill Lynch, it was a really investment bank. Obviously, at Bank of America, it's got the investment bank, it's got the corporate bank, it's got the retail bank, and so you're a small, you're small cog in that machine. I realized that I couldn't have as much influence as I had at a place like Merrill. If Merrill existed today, there's probably a good chance I'd still be there. I felt like I had access to through and up the chain of command at Bank of America. The headquarters was in Charlotte. The finance group was in New York. They probably cared more about ATM fees going up from $2 to $3 than they did what I was doing. So I just felt a little lost in that organization. I would think like Merrill Lynch was like more like being in the SEAL teams,
Yep.
and going to Bank of America was probably like more like being in the Army. And
Yep.
and like I said, tons of respect of Bank of America and what they do. It just wasn't a great fit for me. Also, as a risk taker, because of Dodd Frank and Volcker, they're really trying to cut down on banks taking up balance sheet risk, right? So, before I could operate like a hedge fund and also as a trader and have a portfolio. In the new model post, Dodd Frank and Volcker, they did not want me to hold and house risk. And so that's when I decided, I said, I really like to invest. And so I need to find a job on the buy side. And so that's when I looked around, and I eventually got an opportunity to go over to um, O'Connor, which is a multi-billion-dollar hedge fund. It was housed inside a UBS asset management. When a lot of the asset managers were buying hedge funds or alternatives, they acquired a Chicago, one of the first multi-strategy hedge funds out of Chicago called O'Connor.
Got it. And did you was it through a connection you had over there? Was it something you've been looking at for a while, or what was the decision to? Is it yeah? I mean, kind of what pushed you to go that way? I get the fact that understanding you wanted to have something where you were more in control, smaller team, just that operated faster, right? Just that OODA loop was faster at a smaller company, vice in corporate America. I totally get that. Why them, or what was the pull?
So to be honest with you, Bank of America was going through a lot of rifts, right? A reduction in force. And so
Mm.
I went up to my boss and I said, "Hey, listen, I want to get rift, right?" And he's like, "What are you talking about? You're my top, one of my top guys here." I said, "Listen, I I I just I need to leave, right? And I said, "Will you please put me on the?" Because he every group had to submit one or two names, and I was like, "Can you please submit me?" And he's like, "Mike, how about this? Why don't you take and think about it for 30 days, and come back to me after you think about it, and hopefully you change your mind." Well, 30 days came and went. I never approached him about it. I just assumed that he'd know that I still want to be riffed. And so then the riff happened, and he called me up. And he's like, "We got really bad news. I submitted you to be riffed, and someone above me pulled your name out, and they said you." So so then, so then, so then I had to call HR and explain to him that I really wanted to be riffed, and so it was an awkward situation, right? When you want to leave and they won't let you leave. So
That's funny.
finally they were figured out how to let me go. And so when you get let go, sort of the world kind of in financial finds out that you're no longer there because your Bloomberg is shut down. And so I got a bunch of inbound calls. I was just one of those things. You got to have confidence that you'll figure it out,
Yeah.
because interviewing for a job is a full-time job. And how can you do your job effectively if you're interviewing, right? It's really, I always thought it's like really awkward to interview while you're working. And I just wanted, I always put risk. I'll like I said, I'll put risk on myself, right? And,
Yeah.
and whether I'm unemployed, right, or rift. And so I got a bunch of inbound calls, and so a lot of them were former clients of mine at Merrill Lynch and Bank of America, and they said, "Hey, listen, we have a job opening that we've been searching for quite some time." They knew me as a counterparty, as a trader, and so they immediately accelerated that to a job offer at this hedge fund.
That's awesome. I mean, again, reputation precedes you, right? I mean, that's being a good, you know, just partner in business comes back around, right? And obviously, what you did through your time at Merrill, helping send the elevator back down, right? Being the sandwich guy, doing all the things behind the scenes pays off in the long run. That's the lesson I take away from a lot of this is that when you need the network, it's there for you because you get more out of it when you put than you take out, I mean, than you put in, I think. But you have to put in and do it in a way where you're not looking for something in return. But when the time comes you need it, it's there for you because you did do all the behind the scenes. You took the phone calls yourself. I'm sure you helped the guy on a day you didn't want to help the guy, but you did all those things. And when it was time for you to need help, the door opened for you as well, which is great. Yeah, I love that.
100%. And like this, the sales team, they always took out the clients and went to these client events, and it was seldom that they'd ask the traders to come with them, right? I got asked to come with them all the time, right?
Yeah,
And a lot, yeah, they want to hear the war stories or meet the token Navy SEAL, but really that was my opportunity to kind of get to know the clients better,
yeah,
right? And interact with them. And I had this one client from SAC, and we would golf together, we'd go on trips together. Our wives, then girlfriends, were friends, and it really, like, it's like you build these partnerships, um, with your clients, right? And it was interesting. Like they would they would bring orders specifically for me, right? Non-competitive orders, right? And it was like, it was yours to lose, right? Unless you were going to try to like misprice something, right?
yeah.
And so there was that level of trust that you weren't going to take advantage of that relationship for a short-term gain. It's like you need to be long-term greedy, and you still, and you have to have those alliances, those friendships that are built on trust, so that when you're off on your own, you got your phone blowing up with guys inbounds, looking to help you out.
That's awesome. No, and obviously worked out. And that transition went well. I mean, how big of a pivot is it from going from the big corporate Bank of America to that next role? Was it? I mean, what was the difference? What was the good pros and cons? I assume more pros, but you wouldn't have gone if it wasn't that. But yeah,
Yeah, no, a lot of pros. I think I knew a lot on how like the sauces were made at the investment banks, and then when I went to the buy side, I could take all those things that I knew, and then I always felt like I was always an investor on the sell side, even though we're quote unquote traders. We were carrying a lot of risk, and you could skew your bid ask based on how you wanted to shape your portfolio. So Yeah, I think the transition to the buy side was generally pretty easy. The one thing I did notice though, it was extremely quiet, right? From going
Mm.
from a sales and trading organization to an investment organization, it was very quiet. It was almost like going right into a library, and so you didn't have that constant activity. And sometimes you would trade one or two trades a day. You do it on the phone. You're not yelling and screaming at salespeople or traders. You're dealing directly, with the counterparty, whether it's through Bloomberg or through a phone call. So, um, but no, I enjoyed that transition to the buy side. I think the one thing you are is you are in an information gap. So like
Mm.
when you're on the sell side, you're at the crossroads of every investor, right? They have to come through you in order to transact. When you're it's like you're at the hub, right? And so when you're on the hedge fund side, you're on the spoke. And so your you need to yeah, how do you go from being the spoke to getting information from the hub? Well, you got to build those alliances again, right? That even though that you switch from being buy side to sell side, you need to build, you got to build those sell side alliances so they can tell you what's going on, what type of flow they're seeing, who's buying, who's selling, why they're buying, why they're selling, because that can inform your investment decision whether you should hold, you should wait. Maybe they're seeing tons of sellers, so even though you think something's cheap, maybe you should wait, a while until it sort of
Yeah.
settles. Um, so there's a lot of advantages. And again, just because you flip from the buy side to the sell side, doesn't mean like they always say like people on the buy side have this attitude, right? That oh, I'm God, I'm great, right? And they kind of change their stripes from being a customer to being to a service provider, than being someone that is provided service. And I always feel like it didn't matter whether I was on the sell side or buy side. I was always a service provider.
Yeah.
And so that communication between the buy side and sell side, it didn't matter on what side of it, because the sell side could provide me with a lot of information that I needed. And I could provide them with a lot of information that they could use, whether I thought something was rich or cheap or undervalued. And so they would take that into account as well. So again, I know it wasn't a hard transition. It was different. But it was great. It was great. I enjoyed working at O'Connor for several years.
And then, yeah, how long did you do that for? What was that path, and kind of where did that lead you to from there? Let's kind of keep on rolling down the,
Yeah,
timeline.
well,
Yeah.
yeah. So like anything, like hedge funds, you kind of jump around, and so when I was at O'Connor, we probably had 400 or 500% turnover. So the buy
Wow.
side has a lot of turnover. Yeah. So buy sides, it's all X's and O's, P and L. On the sell side, you can hide, right? You can hide, on that seat, right? But on the buy side, it's all it is X's and O's. And so I ended up going to another hedge fund that was headquartered out of Minneapolis called Walleye. They were an up and coming multi strategy hedge fund that had aspirations to grow to a large multi strategy hedge fund. And so I really like the leadership, the founder, Irv Kessler. It's just a phenomenal guy. Andy Carney was a CEO at the time. Another just phenomenal guys, Mark Tussler, the CFO. So all these guys that I met, I was like, these are great Midwest people. They're like my people, and then I really embraced the vision of growth, and so it was an opportunity to go to another hedge fund, but have more of an entrepreneurial mindset where like you could sort of build everything you wanted to do while they grew. And so they were, like I said, they were a new up and coming fund. They had another business that had been around for a long time, but they had just created this new hedge fund product. And so I jumped in early to run a global mandate and build out a global team. And so I jumped at that opportunity, and I was there for 5 years. And so yeah, I really enjoyed my time there.
I like the name walleye. I married a girl from Green Bay, Wisconsin, so I can appreciate the walleye and the importance of good fishing up there. So good stuff. That's great. And I mean, it was yeah. It seems like you're always you and correct me if I'm wrong, but enjoyed the smaller, faster paced, more being in control more, right? Just being able to pull the levers yourself, vice being somewhere where, again, I think it's just you like that. That's what leaders do. You want to be the one that's in charge and can make the calls and actually impact the outcomes. Is that fair to say you were looking for those type of roles where there was always just a faster, more, I mean, for you to have the more levers at your disposal, if you will, to make those decisions, to have more, because you're not afraid to take risks. I think that's part of what, being the SEAL background, you were open to that, maybe more or less risk averse than others might be. So like just jumping into it, right?
Yeah, I think you're right. Like I don't have to be the head guy in charge, right? Even at a
Right.
SEAL team, I was never the commanding officer, right?
Right.
But I love to be part of that strategic, shaping of that team.
Yeah.
Whether I was an operations officer, whether I was, running a global portfolio, operating and reporting directly to the CEO and CIO. Now in my present role as president and co-founder, I'm talking to our other head of strategy, co-founder, our CEO, founder. I'm talking to them every day, right? And so, I love having a seat at the table, but I also like to like roll up my sleeves and do. Like I love to
Yeah.
still operate, and so sometimes you have to balance the two, right? You want to be a doer, but you also have to allow others to do things on their own and report back. And you also have to see where there's like some slippage and where you can inject yourself because something has to get done. And
Yep.
so yeah, no, I enjoy shaping the future of organizations.
And how did you? What was the decision to get from out of that hedge fund space into the defense tech? Was that something that just had been on your mind? I mean, that seems like a. I mean, they're not necessarily related industries per se. I mean, I'm sure there's a path that they would go. But what was the to get to where you are now? What was that? What was that decision calculus like?
Well, I got to be honest with you. First time in my career, I got fired.
Oh,
Yeah, and it happened like 2 days or 3 days after my mom died.
wow.
And I gotta tell you, when I got fired, not one comment about "Hey, sorry for your loss." And when I heard that, I knew it. I just like, you know what? I am so glad that I'm leaving this organization. They had a lot of turnover in the top. They brought in a lot of people from other hedge fund organizations, and the culture just really changed. And
Mm-hmm.
so, when one door closes, another one opens.
Yeah.
And so, I have known the founder for like 30 years, and he and I talked a lot about this opportunity or opportunities to work together. And it wasn't until well over a year ago he was talking about this ramjet technology that I was working on, and so initially, I started working with him as a consultant. I said, you know what, I'm going to help you out. I'm going to see where this goes. I'm going to, I know I can help you out. This is great. I took on some other advisory work with a public company. I took on another job as a board member of a public company. And so again, when doors closes, like things open. And
Yep.
so sometimes instead of like turning something again, again, what I would say is I never thought I would ever get fired in my life, right? I was always in the top
Yeah.
10% of my peer group. I made over 100 million for this fund, and I got to tell you, it's a you initially internalize it, and then when you realize it's not you, it could be somebody else that has just you don't gel with or you don't work with, and so or maybe they're going a different direction. They were pulling things back into New York City, and I was the guy that was living out in La Jolla. So it just didn't match for the long term
Yeah.
in a post COVID environment. And so what I would tell you though is I had all these other things that were going on, and so and then I was raising money for a company in defense tech, right? And they were trying to raise $4 million, and we were able to raise their seed investment for them under, and again, like all these sort of things were happening and transpiring at the same time. And so again, and then all of a sudden I was getting a bunch of inbounds from other hedge funds about coming on board. And so again, my thought is, you know, clear your head, get some headspace, figure out what the opportunities are. Do you want to go back to a walleye and kind of rinse and repeat because those relationships are built? I could jump in a seat and make a lot of money right away, or do you want to try something completely different? Because when you have it, this is an opportunity to kind of completely reset and retool. And so
Yep.
right now, I had an opportunity to join as head of finance, corporate development, and then it became COO and head of finance, and now it's president of USA and co-founder. And all of a sudden, it's like, yeah, like you know what? I have tons of experience to bring to this team, both operationally and in finance. And then on top of it, I love the mission, right? I
Yeah.
love the mission, and I've always loved defense. I've always loved the defense community. Um, when you talked about SAS, I mean, I was on a phone call with Australian SAS and British SAS, about these systems we're developing. So for me, it's a lot of fun. You get to sort of like retool yourself and learn a different skill set, and you get to harness some of the skills that you built, for the 10 years of being an operator or operations officer in the military, and the two worlds sort of collide together. And we're a startup. We're
Yeah.
venture backed. We're going and we're raising more money here in a short term. It's on me to raise it, and it's a lot of fun. I love it. It's exciting, and we're getting pulled globally, right? We're under contract with the UK government. I'm heading to I'm heading to Taiwan in a few days to talk about our capability set and how it could match some of their requirements. We're talking at senior level people in the US DoD. We got investors from Australia, from Germany, from Poland, from the UK. I mean, it is a global alliance. And it's a lot of fun of what we're doing because we're a very disruptive technology, and the way we come to the market is very disruptive. So people will talk about legacy primes being, defense 1.0, and then you got Andril, which is disruptive defense 2.0. Like we're defense 3.0.
Hmm.
And so I'm pretty excited about what we're doing. We have the leadership in place to do it. I mean, we have guys. The founder has taken a company public twice, sold one to Google. The other co-founder, he was at Apple when they launched the iPod and iPhone, and then he was at Nest when they sold to Google. The head of engineering has been at every North, Raytheon, GE, Boom Hypersonic, Fury is the lead engineer at Fury that got bought by Andril. So like the team itself has all the core attributes to be successful. And what we're doing is nothing short of significant, both on a strategic level and for a global alliance. Based on what we're seeing in Europe, based on what we're seeing in the South Pacific, there's no better time for us to come to market with this technology.
I love it. And I love a few things. I mean, again, I love just how you embraced. I mean, I'm sure it took a little bit of time, but one door closes, another one opens. And I think it's important for folks to hear that because they're going to get doors closed in their face a lot, especially early on in your transition. That's going to happen. But I mean, you have to embrace it as an opportunity, vice as something that's a bad thing. Try to find the positive in the door closing. Obviously, opened a great path for you. I think that's a phenomenal lesson and takeaway. But I also love the fact that you talked about being a lifelong learner and you're constantly reinventing yourself for the newest thing. I think the worst thing you can do is get stagnant somewhere and the world kind of moves on by you. But the willingness to whether it's reinvent yourself or just invest in the learning and development piece to find that new thing is so important because again what the world was 30 years ago and the trading floor of the past is not what it is today. I mean, nothing is like what it was. And if you want to stay relevant, you have to continue to reinvent yourself and figure out those ways to, just be current. And you've done a great job of that, I think, over in a variety of markets. It's great to see, and a great example, I think, for other veterans out there that are in this transition process or wherever they are in their transition process. So, good stuff. Very cool.
Yeah, my advice is just bet on yourself, right? Bet on yourself, and others will. The other two is if you have the ability to take time. And while you're sort of de-risking it, like stay busy, right? And so even if it's doing free work, it is accretive to what you want to do. And sometimes your ability to do some free work might get you in the door because you develop a new skill set. And so
Yeah.
I don't think of it as free work. I think it's is it more of an investment in yourself. And
Yep.
so be willing to do that.
I love it. I love it. I love it. I love your journey. Anything I know you've obviously been involved with the Navy SEAL Foundation for a long time. Anything I know we're getting ready to wrap up here, but anything you want to share about what you're doing still or how you're giving back to the military community? I know it's been a passion of yours, obviously, whether off the side of your desk or really leading the organizations. I'd love you to close with kind of a plug for what you're doing in the community still to help out those folks that are, looking or need help.
Yeah, sure. So I'm going to join the board of the. So I left the Navy SEAL Foundation because I termed out. So I did two tours. The second tour was 10 years. I was been on the board on and off for 16 years, and the organization is phenomenal. It's time to move on. I got quickly snatched up by the Navy SEAL Museum.
Huh.
We're building a world class museum in San Diego. It's gonna cost a couple hundred million to build it. We have our showcase that's opening up next month in San Diego. It's a 10,000 foot showcase. So think of it as a miniature museum. It is going to be phenomenal. And so really the mission there is to pull resources across the U.S. to build this state of the art museum that's going to give back to not only the community but the local community here in San Diego. So very important mission. For me to continue to connect and stay relevant with the community and give back to the community. That's been great. I'm a father of five kids, and so I coach football. Okay, secret here: I never played football, but I'm 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 a coach on three teams.
That's awesome.
And I love spending time with the kids. I'm taking the kids with the 7th and 8th grade class in DC in November. Their first DC trip. So I really enjoy like spending time in my family, my community, and giving back to the SEAL community, and helping where I can. I know. As we grow and get more funding, we ought to have an opportunity to hire more people. I definitely want to hire more veterans into Tiberius. Tiberius is a great company, and it's going to grow. We're going to probably triple in size next year. So I'm really excited about the opportunity to bring on more, what I'd say veterans into that community as well.
I love it. I'm the father of five as well, so I can appreciate it. Mine are a little bit older, but I've been there. And again, I think I love the balance of, personal life, spiritual life. I mean, I'm a big Catholic guy, grew up in New Orleans, so I mean that having that balance, because like when those things get out of balance, when your work life, spiritual balance are in the line, that's when things go sideways, right? But be able to still invest and do the things and coach and take the kids out there and give back to the veteran community while taking Tiberius to the next level is awesome. But I love to hear that balance because people can lose that, I think, sometimes. And you certainly have done a great job of keeping that in sync. So thank you for the time today, Mike. I really appreciate it. I love your insights. Any closing thoughts before we wrap up?
No, I mean, it's just, Bo, thanks again for your service and for having me on. It was a really honor. And, hopefully, this message can carry to the community. And I say is like, make those contacts and those connections, and don't be short term with them. Be long term greedy with them, and really develop those friendships, right? And so my intent was never to build an ecosystem of folks that I could leverage later on in life.
Yeah.
My intent was to build an ecosystem of friends, and really, like when I think about some of my best friends now, they weren't veterans. They support we do have a lot in common by supporting veterans. We're aligned there. So find the people that you're aligned with personally, and build those long-term friendships, because I'll tell you, they'll do anything for you when you need it. And it's not just the veteran community; it's the civilian community that's going to be there for you as well.
I love it. Hey, that's great advice to close out with. That network, invest in your network today because you never know you need it tomorrow. And you can't go wrong. Again, thanks for your time, Mike. Appreciate it. And look forward to meeting you in person one of these days soon.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this episode. For more content, follow us on Instagram at TheMilitaryVet or on LinkedIn. Join us at an upcoming event or learn more on our website, TheMilVet.org. Feel free to email us directly at leadership@TheMilVet.org. Thank you so much and take care.